Hello and welcome back. In this video we'll be looking at IDS. IDS stands for Intrusion Detection System, and it is used to catch criminals in the cyberspace. However, you should note that the intention of using IDS is to identify intrusions, so it doesn't necessarily block attacks that are happening or will be happening later on. However, this gives us a better idea about what kind of attack behaviors are like, and understand better about how the attack can happen. So we can identify them first, then we will be able to use those information to prevent other attacks that are similar or the same happening from the future, in the future. Okay, so when we talk about intrusion detection systems, we need to first understand what intrusions are. So intrusion is a set of actions that compromises CIA. Okay, those actions can include things like denial of service, installing backdoors, spreading viruses, exploiting software vulnerabilities, etc. So any attacks that you think of can impact the CIA will fall into an intrusion. Okay, so now we understand a bit about intrusion. Now we need to understand how the intrusion detection mechanism happens. So the intrusion detection is detecting signs of security problems and analyzing the events happening in the computer network systems. Okay, so any ways we can gather the evidence about how the attacks may happen, then it will be part of the intrusion detection. Okay, we assume that the system activities such as users and the programs can be monitored. So if you think about very basic ones like task manager is the way it monitors how the systems behave. Okay, so maybe you're like me, like long time ago, just stare at the task manager to see which one's using up all the CPUs and try to track down what that guy's installed and get rid of it, and every now and then break your computer. But yeah, and the steps to do this is to monitor, identify, and assess, which involves analyzing the hosts and the network, any misuse, abnormal activities, as well as severity, and alert administrators. So I think on existing systems now, you can find some logs about the security and tells you what kind of activities may have been like good or not good, like the Windows firewall defender, something like that. I think it provides you some logs about some activities. So things like that falls into these intrusion detection systems as well. Okay, so what intrusion detection systems do is basically it's a combination of software and hardware to perform intrusion detection. Okay, and it can be placed in multiple locations in the network, but typically where we want to place it is just after the firewall. Okay, so if anything that does get through the firewall, we'll be able to use our IDS to detect whether those are malicious or not. Okay, it's violating the CIA. And there are a few different models of IDS. Let's have a look. So intrusion detection models includes misuse detection as well as anomaly detection. So similar to like the zero-day vulnerabilities we were talking about, this pattern will keep re-emerging. Like it's a signature or knowledge base, so you know something that shouldn't be there, as well as looking at behavior based. Okay, and they both have their own pros and cons. Okay. And intrusions can happen in the different parts of the network. For instance, the detection can happen at the network level, or it can happen at the host level. Okay, and some intrusion detection systems will combine both. So your own host has its own intrusion detection system, monitoring the activities that are happening. Okay. However, you can also have those monitoring systems on the network to detect the packets, just like the firewall. Okay, but it has its own functionalities. Okay. Let's have a look more about misuse and anomaly detections. Okay, so in misuse case, what we're trying to do is well-known attack signatures that can be stored in the database. So when a new signature matches, then we know that it's an intrusion. So for instance, we can see like requests of packets at specific applications or at certain ports. We can identify that, and if some sequence of actions happen, and we identify that as some sort of signature of an attack, we can alert. Okay. Also, current audit trails are compared with stored signatures. So things that are progressing right now that can be stored and then be compared against the stored signatures as well. So basically, anything that you measure and those trials can be compared to the knowledge-based, then it will fall into the misuse case. On the other hand, the anomaly detection is trying to identify deviations from the normal usage patterns. For instance, your CPU usage on average is about 20% and suddenly it skyrocketed to 70%. Then maybe something bad is happening. Okay? So this happens by applying statistical measures to classify activities and behaviors. So this is the way we try to measure whether it's an anomaly or not. So if it falls within the normal boundaries, then we might not say it's an anomaly. However, actually I have a next slide. Okay, so they both have pros and cons to it. Like for instance, misuse case, the pros are that it's accurate. We know it's actually an attack and we can detect it quite easily, and it's easy and quick to set it up. However, it can be very slow, especially when your list of knowledge base grows, and it cannot detect variations that easily. Okay. And to capture those, you have to update your signature quite frequently as well. Okay. On the other hand, anomaly detections can be pretty fast because we're not looking for a huge range of signatures, but rather just making decisions based on the behaviors. And it is also allow you to detect variations. So like new attacks can also be detected using anomaly. However, it does have potentially high false results. For example, you never went to a specific website for a long time and suddenly you went back there. Then it can be detected as an anomaly because you normally don't do that. And this detection mechanism based on statistics said, oh, this looks like an abnormal behavior. So it can be classified as false positive. And also there will be cases where some actual attacks will be falling into the false negatives where it doesn't really get detected because it looks similar to your own usage behavior. Okay, and therefore it does require some profiling behaviors, which can be very tricky for different users as well. Okay, so IDS can be placed on the host or the network or both for hybrids, and basically the host intrusion detection system sits inside the host system. So for instance, within your laptops or computers or servers, etc. Okay, and it monitors the system usage. So it's going to monitor your CPU usage, memory usage, disk read and out, network usage, and so forth. And this will be dependent on your OS. So your OS may come with or may not as well. Whereas network intrusion detection systems sits in the network attached at a location. There's also a few different versions of this where some packets, stream of packets, can be copied and evaluated by the network intrusion detection systems, or ones that has to go through the network intrusion detection system. So it really depends the way it happens. But basically what they're trying to do is capture and monitor packets in the network. So it works similar to the firewalls, but it will have its own detection mechanisms implemented. So that's pretty much what I want to cover with IDS. There are other cool tools that you can utilize. Things like Wireshark, Metasploit, Nessus, Snot, OpenVS, etc. I'm not going to go over every one of them. You will have interaction with some of them through the labs and the assignments. So I'm just going to quick look at Wireshark. So what Wireshark allows you to do is examine data from live network or from a captured file on disk. So you can either capture the network streams and then evaluate it, or just have a look at live network and see what's happening. You do require root privilege to tap into the network interfaces, so just bear in mind. Wireshark has several powerful features, including rich display filter language and the ability to view the reconstructed stream of TCP sessions. So this means not just looking at packets by packets, but you can have a look at the meaningful ways of how the streams are followed by filtering out all the other irrelevant ones. Okay? It also supports hundreds of protocols and media types, so it's very handy and quite useful. I'm pretty sure you'll be using it for your assignment as well. Okay, so some of the examples include be able to detect emotet. This is a Trojan that is primarily spread through spam email. So it's typically spam email. There's a attachment that gets spread through. Emotet is polymorphic, so which means it can change itself every time it is downloaded. So it becomes a little bit tricky to detect, especially using some signatures. Emotet also uses CNC servers to receive and update. So it's going to have some sort of a communication with the malicious server to update itself. Okay. This allows the attacker to install updated versions of the software and store additional malware such as other banking trojans. And emotet is typically linked with TrickBot. Okay, and TrickBot was developed back in 2016, and this is still spreading around in its variants. Basically, when it was released, it was targeting banking. It was a banking trojan. Okay, it stole Bitcoin wallets, but it can also harvest emails and credentials. So like username and password being used while you're infected can be captured and sent back to the malicious server. The endpoint user will not notice any symptoms of a TrickBot infection. That's how it was designed to do. You can think about how. Nevertheless, network admin will likely see changes in traffic. So suddenly you're making some requests to some random places that you've never been before. So as an admin, you may be able to pick that up. Okay. All right. So we're gonna have a quick look. So this one is one of the TrickBot packets that has been captured into a PK file. So you can see it's actually really, really long. How many sequences? About 20,000 packets interacted in this capture. So we try to find out how we can identify those attacks, right? So it is known that the emotet is sent through like a text attachments, which does some executables. So we should be looking out for the texts. And also the TrickBot is known to be spreading around through images like PNG files. So we're going to be looking for those couple of files. Okay. So what we will try to filter out is first to look at some HTTP requests. HTTP, the request. At the same time, we will try to filter out SSL handshake. Handshake dot type. Okay, and that's the typical filter we will use to identify TrickBot. Okay, so when we filter this out, we get a much smaller set of things, so we can go over this a little bit easier. And at the very top, typically in a live packet, it's not going to be, but this one is specifically capturing the TrickBot. So this one is just filtered out beginning and end of the tag. So we see that NCSI text, this one is probably likely be the emotet that got through. And what this emotet did was request the malicious server to install TrickBot. Okay, so if we scroll down, it's going to get some client hellos, and eventually we reach where the client is requesting a PNG file. So this probably looks very suspicious and likely to contain the TrickBot, right? So what we can do is just have a look at what happens after that. So this is a GET request. So our poor victim is located at 10.1.75.167. That's our victim. And after getting that, the trick bot will probably have tried to make some requests to send some sensitive information. So this looks like probably our attacker's address, and usually, hopefully, this should be banned or blacklisted by your providers, but sometimes not. And this port also looks very suspicious. So 8082 is known to be used by the trick bot to send over some profiles of the target victim systems. 8081 is used for sending credentials, and there's a few others. So what we're going to do is, check this guy in HTTP stream. Okay, and what it captures is, this is the sequences that it captured for that, and another window should have popped up. It looks like this. So this is what it looks like as a receiver, and one's highlighted in red is the one that has been sent by the client, the victim. Blue is from the attacker. Okay, so you can see that it's giving out some sensitive information about the victim. Things like what kind of system processes is it running, what is the configurations of the system, network information, what kind of interfaces we're using, and so forth. Okay, so by gathering this information, the attacker can now start to craft some other attacks as well. Okay, but bear in mind that if the victim doing some interacting credentials, then this the trick bot can also steal that information as well. Okay, so you can try to look up online for some tutorials. There are other examples that capture those. Okay, so that's that. And for the Metasploit one, I'm not going to cover it in the video because I don't really have time, but there's a YouTube video that tells you a bit more about using Metasploit. So that's a good one to have a look. All right. So in summary, there are various tools built for different purposes, and they can be applied into different layers of the system. So when you want to utilize some of the tools, you should have objectives about what kind of security you want to measure and evaluate. So consider the security objectives, that's the main thing, and evaluate that those are met with existing security protocols and tools. Okay? So here's an open question: how do we do that? We will touch base on that in a couple of weeks' time. Right? Otherwise, I'll stop here and see you in the next video. Bye!